What did you do that unintentionally destroyed someone's life completely? When I was about 8 years old, I was playing golf with another friend. I went for a swing and ended up splitting his jaw into like 10 parts or so. He now speaks a little bit odd 15 years later. I introduced my then roommate to Final Fantasy XI, dropped out of his full-ride scholarship, and dedicated his life to that game. I've known a lot of people who have their entire lives revolve around MMOs, myself included. They can be just as damaging to a person as substances if not careful. Addiction doesn't need an external chemical component. Sometimes the chemical releases from our brains while doing certain activities is enough to cause real addiction. Gaming addiction is as real as gambling and shopping addiction. But I also think someone has to have some issues to begin with for the addiction to be able to take hold. There was obviously something this person was trying to escape from before they were introduced to the game. Happy people don't develop life-destroying addictions. So you know that guy, Count Dankula, who taught his pug to be a far-right extremist and is now facing hate crime charges? I know I'm probably not really the cause, but I posted his video to Reddit because I found it on YouTube with a few thousand views. Then it sort of went viral on Reddit and ended up with millions of views. The attention it got caused him to be arrested for hate crimes, and now he potentially faces years in prison and difficulty finding a job ever again if found guilty. I know it probably would have still gone viral if I didn't post it here, eventually, but I can't help but feel a bit guilty for being the one who first posted to Reddit. Hope the poor guy doesn't get charged. A new guy at my old job, Bill, was bragging about his hot new girlfriend, Cassie. At our college party before we went on leave for 2 weeks, I saw him with a very pretty blonde just kind of standing around. Since he was new, I decided to help break the ice, show them around and meet some people. I walk over, introduce myself, say hi to Bill and then say, "And you must be his girlfriend, Cassie. He's told us some great things about you." He goes as white as a ghost. "No, I'm his wife, Rachel." I didn't know what to do, so I made an excuse that I must have mixed them up with another couple, and made my escape. They got divorced a couple of months later. You know what? I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that Bill absolutely had that one coming. He really set himself up for marital self-destruction in multiple stages, and we only have to feel bad for Rachel for not getting out sooner. Pat, the alcoholic regular at the truck stop I used to work night shifts at. He used to come in every night for a bottle of Rumplemans before heading home. He was clearly a drunk, but a friendly and good-natured one. One day, he stopped coming in and nobody saw him for over a year. Then during my last week on the job, he comes in to get gas, and I'm so glad to see him that I brought his traditional bottle of booze for him as a gift since I was leaving. 6 months later, I learned that he disappeared for that year to cut his ties to the area, and moved to the West Coast to sober up and get his life together. He'd managed to kick the booze and start rebuilding his life when he came back to town to pick up some things from his old home before leaving the area forever. He was on his way out of town toward a new life when I gave him that bottle. He relapsed and self-deleted a few months later. Not to sound callous, but I've never really felt guilty about it. There's no way I could have known, and I'm sure there were other factors. I do feel sadness, though, that the world lost a good-hearted man who was struggling with his own demons. I am an alcoholic. Most likely he'd already relapsed in his brain. Most people don't relapse when they're sober and are handed a bottle of alcohol. He'd probably been struggling for weeks or days, or had been planning on moving so he could drink without people knowing. Even if you didn't give him a bottle, he probably would have just bought his own eventually. Alcoholism is a pretty crappy disease. My parents. I came from an upper-middle-class family, so my parents paid for everything while I was in college. Housing, tuition, groceries, everything. I had my dad's credit card, and at 20 I started going out to the bar and spending lots of money. They continued to support me, to pay for everything, and I continued to take full advantage for years while ignoring their threats that they would shut off the credit card, which they never did. Then my dad sent me a heartbreaking email one day that said I'd spent all of his retirement money and they were struggling to pay the mortgage. It absolutely broke my heart and I cry just thinking about it. It ruined my relationship with my parents. It's been a few years and I'm making quite a bit of money now. Our relationships are better than they've ever been. At any opportunity I can, I send them money and will continue to do so until they tell me to stop. I'll forever be indebted to them for everything they've done for me, and I'll do anything I can to help them live comfortably for the rest of their lives, because that's what they've done for me. To those who grow up in a loving family, don't ever forget how much your parents love you. Don't ever take it for granted like I did. The one that I'm now trying to unscrew up is my kids' dental health. I spent a few years caring more about pills than I did taking my kids to the dentist or just brushing regularly. Now, when I have to take a kid to the dentist to repair the cavities and/or root canals that I caused them to need, I feel really bad and admit I effed up, and now they're paying for me messing up their lives even in just this one way. When I was 6 years old, I was running around a portable classroom at school while some other older kid was running around in the opposite direction for his own reasons. Our paths converged at the corner and we smashed heads. My forehead was split wide open and I got 13 stitches and still have a straight line scar in the middle of my forehead to remember it by. The other kid, being a few years older and a few inches taller, wasn't so lucky. His eyeball ruptured. I can still hear his screams. I tracked him down on Facebook all these years later to ask if he'd ever want a beer with me, and his response was pretty much, "Yeah, nah, I'm good." I introduced a friend to anime and watched Madoka with him. Ever since then, he's developed a very particular interest for younger anime girls and spends most of his time watching more anime and splurges heavily on figurines, amongst other things. By sophomore year of college, I'd figured out a pretty good rhythm for partying really hard while still getting good grades. At the beginning of the semester, a friend of a friend joined our group. He was a freshman, super smart and also extremely straight edge. He had never drank or had ever really been to a party. None of us pressured him into anything, just invited him to join us. But he started getting into the college party vibe pretty quickly. I guess I just assumed everyone had the same work ethic towards school as me. Even though I went out a lot, like a lot, I still studied every night and never missed assignments. But apparently my new friend didn't get quite as good a rhythm. He started to miss class more and more, went out more and more, and forgot about major projects, amongst other blunders. He ended up failing his first semester of college, and last I heard of him, he joined the military and shipped out overseas. No clue where he ended up. I'll say it doesn't seem so much like he ruined his life as he just didn't try to find the right balance to make himself succeed at school. And joining the military wasn't necessarily a bad thing for him. I know at least one person who was a bit of a screw-up before they joined the armed forces and really got their life together after their service, and even went back to finish their education in a path they knew they wanted to do once they'd had some more time to think and some savings. It was middle school and we were taking one of those state-based tests. I don't really remember the name, but it was the history portion. Our history teacher wasn't the nicest woman and she wasn't fair, so no one was really thrilled to be in her class that day. I remember sitting down, carrying my backpack and tossing it to the side. I was in a bad mood, so I just kind of threw it down, not really caring about it. I just wanted to get this test over with and then take a nap, because they made us put our head down when we're done. 20 minutes into the test and I'm blazing through it. I do love history, so I had no problem, despite our mean teacher. And she was walking along each aisle, checking each person, making sure nobody was cheating. One kid already was yelled at, so we were afraid to look up. I saw her shadow appear from the side, slowly walking down the aisle. Afraid to look up, I stared at my paper, but a scream next to me spiked my head up. "Ah!" She wailed as her elderly body went flying, her body landing on the ground with a big whomp. She had tripped on my backpack. I looked down in shock. "I can't get up! I can't get up!" She wailed on the ground. I was frozen in fear when a teacher's aide ran to her aide. "Go get the principal! Everyone out of class!" she yelled. We were all rushed into the hall, more teachers arrived, and then the principal. An ambulance came there, as there was a hospital close by, and then she was taken away. "Did you trip the teacher?" John tripped the teacher." It spread like wildfire. I was suddenly the kid who'd tripped the teacher. The next day we had a substitute, and the principal in the class with us as we were about to finish the tests. "This is why you're supposed to tuck your backpacks under your desk, not in the aisles." I never got in trouble for it, and it was never pushed to my family. We got a replacement teacher who was actually really cool, and history became a lot more fun again. I learned later our history teacher did come back. She'd damaged her arm and hip permanently, needing a walker. She was getting medically retired, but came to say hello to some old students. I never saw her, but one of my best friends did. The teacher commented on, "It's important to forgive, especially those who've wronged you." And she stared directly at my best friend at this time, knowing she and I were close. The history teacher left the school that day, never to be seen again. In short, historical progress goes whomp. So a lot of arguments are seeming to pop up, so I want to say this. This was about how I unintentionally messed up someone's life, not how they messed themselves up next to me. I left the backpack there and she got hurt. She didn't deserve what happened to her, even as much as I didn't like her. In my mind, it's still both funny and horrifying to me, even after almost 2 decades. So don't be that kid. Tuck away your bag.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe.
Introduced my classmate to League of Legends last year. Since then, he stopped showing up to school for weeks at a time and then he dropped out. And now he has no plans to do anything but play League all day, every day. My best mates when we were 14 and 15. He was a typical rich kid whose parents paid for whatever he wanted. He was pretty spoiled, but he also understood that you have to work to get things. His dad taught him well. Well, anyway, I got some green herb off of another guy in school and gave him his first session, and after that, we were smoking all the time. He moved back up north not long after and hit the hard stuff, and is now smoking a lot of crystal. I know it's not completely my fault, but I can't help but think if I hadn't given him that session, he would never have got into the heavier substances. According to my ex-wife, I single-handedly ruined her life. Seems to me that if you have a lesbian affair and then empty the bank account before filing for divorce, and my lawyer gets the courts to make you pay me a lot of money, you may have some responsibility in your own demise. Back in the day, I had an extra beta key for City of Heroes, an MMO, which I gave to a friend. He met some girl in the game and they hit it off. Problem was, she was extremely needy and slightly crazy. Told him he doesn't need friends since he's got her. And besides, we're all bad influences anyway. So they broke contact and moved to a new city. More than 15 years of friendship gone. If I'd never given him the beta key, he would never have met her. Probably. There's a lot of people in this group of stories feeling terrible for something that's only really partially on them, where someone else ultimately made the fatal decision. There was as much of a chance of him meeting this person as there were chances of meeting an equally terrible person in any other social forum, real life or online. It was just a freak chance that he met them in the thing you gave him. Your friend and this woman did all the destroying themselves. I can't blame myself too much, but this is all pretty recent, so I feel a little responsible. My best friend growing up used to have his grandpa take us home every day together. In high school, my best friend growing up dated this girl. They dated roughly 2 to 3 weeks and then ended it, so it wasn't very serious at all. Over a year later, I somehow ended up getting close to her and asked my friend if it was okay because of their previous relationship. He said it was fine and to go for it. Well, I did, and he didn't take it too well, but didn't really show it. Me and him had naturally grown apart at this time, and we're still good friends, just didn't hang out together daily. He was a bigger kid, but after that, he started losing weight like crazy. Then, not long after, the remains of his father's body were found. He took this really hard, obviously. We grew completely apart and I continued dating this girl through high school until we broke up senior year. He couldn't handle seeing us around each other, so we pretty much stopped talking altogether. Freshman year of college, though, we reconnected and spent some time together. It started becoming more frequent, and he was coming to parties with me and we'd hang out at his house. Around this time, though, I reconnected with this girl. We had some time apart, and getting back together at our age, we were taking it seriously. My friend didn't disappear this time, but I did notice he'd slowly been drinking more. He was already drinking heavily before we got back together, but I thought it was just like all of us college kids were doing. We all drank, smoked, and generally did nothing if it wasn't schoolwork. One night, though, I went to his house and noticed it was a bit much. I watched him drinking full glasses of gin and eventually blacking out in the backyard. I moved him to his bed and his girlfriend watched him all night. This was the last time we talked and he removed all communication with me. Years go by and I tried to reach back out. Him and his girlfriend had a kid but broke up. He had blocked me on Facebook and if I tried to text or call, he just wouldn't answer. Time just kept going and I always thought about him. 3 weeks ago, I got a call that he'd pulled out a piece and self-deleted in his driveway. You can't help but wonder what you could have done or how much you contributed. I wish I'd reached out. I don't think just the girl coming between us was the sole reason at all. But he had said to his ex that he'd thought about self-deleting before. He said he couldn't do anything right and he didn't have anyone to turn to. His life didn't go how it should have at all. He was top of our class and had such potential, but decided to go to a smaller school at home. He failed out and stopped going while the rest of us moved on with our lives. I wish I would have tried more. Incredibly stupid coworker sent an email to my business account calling in sick. Unfortunately, I was sick that day too, and her husband was my stand-in. He read that mail and called a divorce lawyer because his wife had left the house as usual. When she came home from work, her lover's bed, her husband had already organized a removal company. Sorry, not sorry, cheaters deserve the worst, and she destroyed her own life. What I did was completely unintentional, though. Chatting about people in relationships and whatnot with my colleagues. Chill conversation, friendly banter, then said something about another colleague apparently being with another colleague. I was given such a weird look. A boss asked me where I'd heard that, to which I replied another colleague who was on sick leave at the time because of surgery. They nodded knowingly and we began talking about the weather or something. The colleague on sick leave was fired because they weren't supposed to tell people about the other two being together apparently. My workplace has a good reputation in the industry, and our boss has a lot of connections. If they attempt to get a job in the industry anywhere in the future, they're going to get a less than stellar review from the boss, and will probably have an extremely difficult time finding a job. Whoops. I guess you could describe him as the trenchcoat kid of my middle school. Let's call him Bob, because I don't want to keep referring to him as trenchcoat kid, it just feels wrong. Bob was a pretty troubled kid and was picked on quite a bit by people. One day our class was at a nearby park for a kind of relaxing field trip after midterms. Some of my friends and I were being dumb kids and sword fighting with sticks. I didn't know that Bob was nearby watching us, and during our sword fighting, I swung the stick around behind me trying to be cool. Turns out, I accidentally hit Bob with it, and it was his last straw before breaking. He tackled me from behind and started choking me until I lost consciousness. I was told that one of my friends tried to pull him off while others went to grab the teacher but couldn't get him off me even after I was out cold. He was expelled and sent to a juvenile correctional facility for what basically amounted to attempted murder. I have no idea what happened to him since then, but I wonder how his life would have turned out if he'd gotten help instead of shipped off like a criminal, all because I was being dumb and accidentally hit him with a stick. Well, this definitely rates with the title based on the accidental and unfortunate placement of events, but it does sound like something of this nature was going to happen at some point, and at least in this case Bob wasn't alone with someone. Neither you nor Bob died. Sad, but probably for the best his imminent outburst happened in a public place. Only sad that he never got to therapy or something before it happened. I'm sure it's not 100% my fault, but I think I had a hand in ruining my parents' marriage. My brother and I refused to sleep anywhere but our parents' bed. Like for an extremely long time. Years. Eventually, my dad started sleeping in my bed and I slept where he slept, next to my mum. This went on for like 2 years. I know they had other problems, but now that I'm a husband and father, I understand how important intimacy is to a marriage. It really helps keep those lovey-dovey feelings rolling. I can't help but think that if they could have shared a bed, there's a good chance they would have been able to work out their other issues. I think they know that too. And yeah, I also understand that they were the parents and I was the kid, and they should have told me to F off and sleep in my own bed. I was in high school when this happened, about 4 years ago. I had this classmate, let's call him Kevin, who was quiet and normally kept to himself. Others sort of found him weird, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary with him from my perspective. One afternoon during one of our classes, I see that there's a USB lying under Kevin's chair. At this point, I didn't know whether it was his or not, but I grabbed it anyway. Impulsively, I told my friend with the laptop to load up the USB and see what was inside. We didn't expect to find a crap ton of pictures of people in furry costumes doing the deed in there. Suddenly, Kevin comes bounding in, grabs the USB, runs back to his chair and buries his head in his arms. Turns out, he had certain interests. After that, he was known around our batch for being the weird guy who's into furry stuff. And he has no idea it was me who found his USB in the first place. Man, high school sucks. The older you get, the less anyone cares what twinks your wink. My friend's life, and subsequently her family's. Our group of friends decided to just go out one night and party like crazy. We were just being dumb and doing stupid teenage stuff. We were all reckless and thought we were invincible. And then she passed away. While I won't go into extreme detail about what happened, I'll say it was alcohol. She had too much in her system and her body just shut down. I don't feel like it was solely my fault, but I do feel like I contributed to ruining her life because I was there and I was being just as irresponsible as everyone around me. I get physically ill when I see posts about her every now and then. It's even worse when I interact with her parents, which isn't often, and I know that it's terrible, but I can't bring myself to face them. I almost hurled when they were tearfully telling my friends and me stories of my friend's childhood and talking about the things they regretted with their parenting, as if them yelling at her over not cleaning her room or stuff like that while she grew up led to her passing away. Her friends were the worst thing to happen to her. Man, this is hard. My ex, just before we broke up, we were talking about smack and why people go to the lengths they do for it, and he said he'd find us some. It was my idea. Then we broke up. After a while, he called me and said he'd found some. Would I like to come over? I declined because I quit and was only a few months clean from substances at that point. He ended up using it and is now a full-blown addict. This makes me incredibly sad. I've turned my life around, and he wouldn't have brought the stuff if I'd kept my mouth shut. I heard from a mutual friend a while back. She said he lost all of his teeth and his hair is falling out. He was such a great guy, but that stuff ruined him.
When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out Easy Mode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.